What if the voice in your head saying you're not ready is actually proof that you're growing into the leader you're meant to become? Hi, I'm Tori, and welcome to the Modern Humanitarian and Development Leader podcast. In today's episode, I'm joined by Birgit Herman, a leadership coach, ocean and climate advocate, and now the author of the newly released book, Bolder. Birgit has spent years working across international development and conservation, and her journey is anything but ordinary. From crossing Africa by bike to running ultramarathons in the Sahara. But what makes her work so powerful is how she translates those extreme conditions into practical, everyday leadership insights. So, in this conversation, we dive into imposter syndrome, growth, and what it really takes to lead in today's complex and uncertain world. By the end of this episode, you're going to walk away with a new way to understand imposter syndrome, not as something to eliminate, but as a signal that you're stepping into growth, a practical framework for expanding your growth zone so you can lead with more confidence and courage, and simple, actionable tools to navigate fear, self doubt, and stretch yourself without feeling overwhelmed. If you've ever questioned whether you're ready for the next step in your leadership, this conversation is for you. Welcome, Birgit, to the podcast. So great to see you. I feel like our paths have intertwined in many ways over the years. And it's just, I love to see that this is all culminated in this book that you've just published. It's so exciting. And I like to pick a particular theme to focus on. And for this one, I chose imposter syndrome. And the reason for that partially was because you yourself, when I reached out to you, mentioned that, as you were writing this book, you had this impending feeling of imposter syndrome, which we will get to. But for those who don't know you, maybe you can briefly introduce yourself and share what led you to write this book, Bolder.
Thank you, Tori. And it's likewise. It is so great how over the years we have crossed paths so often, sometimes in person, sometimes in digital way. And very happy to be speaking to you today. And it's really early days for me. This book has only launched less than 2 weeks ago. So I'm all very excited about the various elements of how it can be discussed and looked at and applied, which because it's really a book that should help make things happen, not just think about things. And for me, for my background, I'm a person who is helping purpose-driven organizations and individual change makers to make a bigger impact. And that sounds quite wide. I'm working in the international development, marine conservation, climate adaptation space, and a number of different actors in there. The last 3 years were an amazing journey. I started working for myself with my own social impact leadership consultancy, and it's really helping me to either be in an interim executive role, a strategy partner, leadership coach, and doing the array from the partnering, sparing partner, or leading workshops for professional development, or doing more like the mapping in resources and opportunities that are out there for organizations. And what I'm really passionate about is bold leadership for people and planet. I'm an ocean advocate, I'm a climate advocate, and I've been leading organizations in that space for many years. And for me, what really motivated me in those roles was seeing other leaders step up. And sometimes it's like aspiring leaders, sometimes it's leaders who were just given more opportunities, or where I was in a way to actually make that happen, enable the grounds for them to step up. I'm currently living in Timor-Leste, and I've been here for the last 10 years, the majority of the time, in and out, especially when you're having international careers, you often go also to other places. And that all of those various elements was really where that brought me to writing Bolder. And I think the biggest, and I assume we come to that a bit later, is also a lot of my endurance challenges. I love pushing outside the comfort zone on quite extreme ways. Some people would call it mad, crazy. And that. So I've done things like crossing the African continent by mountain bike and running 250 kilometers through the Sahara with everything in my back that I needed for the time. And also more on the colder side with experiences in Antarctica and freediving under polar ice. But there were so many learnings in there that I always brought back into the workplace and used it to inspire and shift culture. And that's where I thought, okay, let's see how I can put it into a book and a framework. And that's what the result was released 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. And reading the book, it's so fun to read about these amazing endurance adventures that you go on and how you interweave, like you said, not only your learnings into leadership, but also in terms of just like the health of the planet, like you said, and like your values are clearly, I think, come out throughout the book. So I'm curious because, this podcast, we really focus on what's needed for modern day leaders. And when you look at today's leadership context, especially in humanitarian and development space, because you have a lot of experience in that area too, what do you think modern leadership requires that it did not 10 or 15 years ago, even?
I know we want to stay within an amount of time that's suitable for an audience to listen. I try as brief as possible. I feel actually it's probably not that it's necessarily changed what is required. It's more that actually it was always required that there is some elements in a modern humanitarian leadership that just wasn't really prioritized because the old system somehow worked. And I was very fortunate to have had also stints in leadership in more corporate spaces, in government in different countries, and seeing how what I think that it's the problem that we are facing in the development sector is normally that there's not enough funding. And then thinking about the people development of the organization is always something that comes at the very last thought because the funding is just not there. So professional development is very difficult to put into a proposal when you have an external funding source. And that's why it's a little being put under the carpet in a sense. Like it's just not at the foresight. And that has just this ripple effect that the people who are currently in leadership positions have never had the experience of really seeing how leadership can actually be done differently. And it's often a handed down without ever having had professional courses or coach or even a mentor. And those concepts are much more common in the corporate world and
Yeah.
often associated more to the executive top leadership, even there, of course, it's an expensive undertaking. But I found in a humanitarian space, there is just no appreciation of what difference it actually could make by changing the mindset and the perspective of the people leading the change. And if you're having a inspiring leadership style, it actually has a way of enabling so many more people to help with the change. And so it's actually an amplifier rather than a limitation. I think that's more where we're coming as resources become more and more scarce, as the international funding scene is shifting even more. I think that's where more the urgency comes from of shaking the system and thinking, okay, what is required so that the current people in there are leading in the best way, that it's amplified, that it's sustainable, that also once a project or so is done, that it still continues. But also actually to give the individuals an opportunity to maybe work in the different sectors later on. As the international humanitarian sector is becoming smaller and smaller, it's quite good to have versatile skills that can be used in a wider change-making space.
Yeah, no, all great points. And yeah, I remember even in 2016 when I started my other podcast, which you've been on, that was because I didn't see any leadership training going on. I didn't see anything being done in a leadership space. And so I feel like it's come quite a ways, but a lot of like what you said, there's still a ways to go and there's a very slow realization. And even though it's interesting you mentioned corporate because I feel like also corporate is of has now, maybe we're going backwards, but I feel like for a while, corporate was also evolving in terms of what it means. Let's step away from management and more towards leadership, which are different things. But, anyways, all that to say, when you were writing this book, one of the things that you shared with me is that, you know, a lot of the book is about being bolder and growth and being uncomfortable, being okay with being uncomfortable as part of that. And you introduce what you call the growth zone. So, can you just walk us through that and how you first developed that idea?
So I can't take the credit for this growth zone framework. There's actually a lot of other people have spoken about this themselves. But for me, it was just so what I realized was probably the biggest step outside my comfort zone was about 11 years ago when I was in a very permanent role in government where everyone around me was celebrating 15, 20-year anniversaries. And I was in there for about 6 years. And I made a decision that I'm very happy.
Sorry, where was this? What
I was
country?
in New Zealand, international relations space.
Okay.
But I always had this feeling like there should be a bit more to my life. I was always too curious I wanted to experience other areas as well. And so I made this decision that I wanted, for various reasons, I came across this article with this group of cyclists crossing the entire African continent by bicycle. And I said it, I read that and I knew that's it. I want to do that. To cut the story short, but that was literally where I made the decision that I'm packing up everything. I sell half, put the other things in storage, resign from my permanent role and go and cycle the African continent. And from that moment, I was being at the finish line 4 months later, where I crossed 12,000 kilometers. I had been a cyclist before on a weekend mountain bike warrior. Yeah, 15 kilometers in the forest was a long day for me. And then there, it 120 kilometers per day. So
Wow.
complete different thing. But it just showed me how if you put your mind to something, you can actually achieve things that are completely outside your comfort zone and something you thought was borderline impossible. But the biggest learning was also that once that was achieved, my comfort zone was just a very different one. It expanded. And that was something that in subsequent years, I always learned how you have your comfort zone and you're thinking that's kind of the limit of what you can do. And then you're expanding it. You're doing something a bit bigger, a bit riskier, something a little outside that space. And suddenly this is the new normality. And that experience, even that it was pushing my physical boundaries, it helped me so much with the mindset that I had then for jobs. Like what happened after that was, for example, I then applied for roles that were much bigger than the ones I had before. And I actually ended up having much bigger roles than this permanent role that I had there in government. That was well respected and I had a great reputation. But so it was already a great starting point. But after that experience, I suddenly felt like empowered to just see what happens if I go for something a bit bigger. And it worked. It totally worked. It didn't backfire, negative sense. And I think this is where, with more repetitions, I really realized how this is. And there is something, it's not just comfort zone and growth zone. There's actually zones in between. So you have fear zone, which is very normal because you're a bit in this, oh God, am I really ready? No, I'm not ready. Should I do this? No, I don't want to do this. Oh, and then you kind of make a little decision to go this way, and then you're hesitant to almost go back. And so this is the fear zone. And once you pass that fear zone, you're in that learning space where a few things are already feeling quite comfortable because you have already tried it, maybe in a different space. And then there's like small failures, small setbacks. And eventually, that's when you're actually properly growing. And the growth is really the comfort zone itself. That is growing. That's the expanded one. So you as a person grow, but actually the mindset of growth. And as long as you're constantly training to do things outside your comfort zone, you actually maintain that growth zone. It has if you don't do it, it can get a bit smaller again. But
Interesting, like a muscle.
It's fresh and constantly trying things that you haven't done before. It's a very it's a mindset that helps you in all areas of life and work and in the humanitarian space.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's normalizing that it's there. There's a fear there. There is a discomfort there. It's part of growth. It's not something that you should be trying to push away because that's just part of the process. And at what point, like where in this growth zone is there imposter syndrome? And how did that come up for you as you were writing this book?
And again, like writing this book was for me a first. I've never written a book before. And because this book is
It's a pretty big deal.
a
Yeah.
leadership kind of business book, but because I'm sharing so much of my own experiences, of our own stories, it was, it felt quite scary actually being so vulnerable and showing so much of me and putting it together in a context of drawing lessons from endurance challenges and being in nature. A few years ago, always separated from work life. Like I was now consciously actually trying to put this all together and not just trying, actually actively putting it together. And every now and then, that was really where I felt myself kind of writing about imposter syndrome. And I did about 30 interviews with purpose-driven leaders and change makers in a wider sense. And the imposter syndrome came up so often. So I was
Wow.
kind of reflecting on that, on writing on that and putting it together with my own thoughts. And in some moments, I felt a bit like, I don't know, it's like, is this really the right thing? Am I just limiting now my career opportunities for myself by actually writing and bringing the endurance lessons into the humanitarian space? It just, sometimes I was really like, what am I actually, who am I to make a point that this is like something that belongs together? And I found it really shocking, rewriting, editing that chapter and catching myself how actually some of those thoughts that I'm trying to be like really practical in my leadership prompts and the reflections that I'm offering as part of the book. And then actually thinking like, how am I applying them at the moment? Like, but it is really, it's that moment of remembering that if those thoughts creep up, it is because you are currently outside the comfort zone and you are only there because you are already outside. Like you are already somewhere in the fear learning zone. You're not yet in the full growth zone, but if you were not trying to get there, you wouldn't have those thoughts. If you're in a comfortable comfort zone, you don't have those imposter thoughts. You're only getting them if you're actually already on the track to the growth, the personal growth.
I see. So it's like a sign that you are growing or that you're on track to grow. And like when you notice that, like when you notice that you have these thoughts, what do you like? What are some of the things that you do that maybe others, I know you teach this in the book, but like maybe you can talk a little bit about what someone can do to kind of walk themselves through getting out, maybe not getting out of imposter syndrome, but overcoming it in some way.
And
Being more comfortable with it.
on a quick fix, kind of, especially if you're like trying to get ready for a situation where, I don't know, you're talking to someone or you have a big meeting and it needs to be quite quick. Then what works for me is actually really taking a moment to appreciating and naming that this is imposter syndrome, that it's not a reality, like actually being quite, because sometimes when your monkey mind just talks you into it and it's quite easy to lose yourself in this black rabbit hole and it's a bit of a vicious cycle. And the narrative is so powerful and you have it in your control what narrative you are having, like what is the story you're telling yourself. So really naming it and really being quite clear, the only reason that you are having those thoughts is because you are currently doing something that is already the start of being extraordinary. You're going out of your normal thing and actually really trying to be more appreciative and proud of it rather than having this feeling of like failure. You're kind of oh, you're not enough. Try to really massage and manipulate the words you're using to describe this feeling and that sensation you have. And the other hand, it's a lot about your breathing, actually. Because with your breath, you are in control of your nervous system. And if your nervous system is signaling to your brain and to the outside world that you're in control,
Mm,
then it has this double effect that it actually happens like this. So, because
interesting.
breathing is automatic if you don't control it, but we as humans, we have an opportunity to control it. And if we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the one where you're in a really considerate, calm space. It's good for decision making. It's good for long-term planning. And that is a way where if you are breathing with your exhale is longer than your inhale, if you're trying to really concentrate of taking a full inhale using your diaphragm, meaning like something like some people describe it as belly breathing,
Mm,
that is giving you much more, yeah, it's activating those positive parasympathetic relaxed ways that calm and being the rock in the storm, rather than the opposite would be like if you notice you're doing quite shallow breathing and not even using the full lung, has a big effect because the shallow breathing is making you much more hyper, and it contributes to anxiety. It's good in the jungle if a tiger is running after you, but it's not so good in a day-to-day work situation where you want to be someone who's making a really informed decisions and has a considerate approach rather than a quick automatic reaction that is often impulsive and doesn't help with the imposter syndrome.
yeah, that's really interesting how powerful the breath can be. And what you're saying too, it's like something that you can do really at any time, right? Like you can just notice that, oh, I need to reset my breathing and, be more aware of that. What are, in terms of when you were interviewing all these people about imposter syndrome, what did you notice? Were there any patterns that you noticed where it would come up or how it would come up?
I think the pattern is more that there's no one safe from imposter syndrome. It's
Mhm.
this is the thing. It happens to anyone, and which I guess is a good thing because that means that the higher up, like the more you are in the senior leadership roles, executive leadership roles, you're just facing different challenges that suddenly put you into that spot. So that was more the interesting one. Unless you just resigned to a certain routine and never do something different. If that, I mean, in that space, you will not have imposter syndrome. But at the moment you're actually trying to do something a bit different, new, maybe bigger, in a different context, in a different country, you're doing a project in a new community or so. I mean, that is where, yeah, there are good chances that you're actually facing a high level of anxiety and suddenly those feelings of doubt, self-doubt, perceived loss of confidence.
Yeah, I see. Is there one particular person you can think of that had a story you could share from the book of someone who experienced apart from yourself?
I don't want to like single out one specific, but like working with so many, it's more like actually more in an applied working setting. What I would say to generalize a little bit, it definitely is more common amongst female leaders to have
Mhm.
imposter syndrome. Like it's much more common to, yeah, maybe it's more actually that everyone has that voice of self-doubt, but in my experience is that it shows and manifests itself more strongly with a lot of female leaders.
Interesting.
And it's likely also called due to not having too many role models who are actually showing the opposite.
Mm,
So like being much more often actually in this pioneering, being the first kind of situation. And for me, being a woman myself, I think I'm also getting more approached like with female team members or young female leaders like approaching me for advice. Yeah, I think I'm ticking the box that,
mm.
that I have gone through this journey myself. So it's definitely, I would say it's much more prominent amongst female representatives to be unsure how to deal with those voices that are creeping up.
I see. Wow. And that's really interesting, but not too surprising. And what do you normally tell them when they come to you with these thoughts?
Right. In the book, I have the one thing is about being really clear of what you're standing for. So
Mm.
it's about being clear about your values, being clear about your purpose and the vision that you have for yourself, so that if there's some criticism, and because I mean, sometimes of course, you have an imposter syndrome, you do something, and the feedback is in a way that it actually supports your. So it's not at always that when you go outside your comfort zone and you're doing something that the feedback is actually helping and encouraging. Of course, the reality is that it can actually be that there's people in the room who kind of steer those negative voices even more. But that's the moment you're really clear on what you're standing for and what your bigger vision is and why you're doing certain things. It's much easier to make the feedback less personal, and it doesn't work so like being still clear. You still did one small step towards the bigger thing that you want to do, achieve, drive, whatever it is that you're doing. And the other part is actually really that small step. Like instead of thinking of in an ultra marathon way, describing it, like when I ran the 250 kilometers through the Sahara, it's not that you stand on the start line and think, oh, I'm running 250 kilometers, because that is just so overwhelmingly big and it's so hot and we have unusual heat waves. And it's just, this is not helpful, even considering that it's such a long distance. But if you're breaking it down into those smaller stages and thinking, okay, the first border checkpoint is at 15 kilometers, and kind of celebrating every 5 kilometers and maybe allowing yourself, like, I don't know, the food that you have, like little rations of, okay, at 5 kilometers, that's when I get this snack. And the next 5 kilometers, I'm taking a salt tablet and things like that. And then having the first milestone where there's a water check and really being kind of proud about this. And then tuning in and thinking about the next phase. And that's helps with imposter syndrome so much. Instead of thinking about this really big end result, being more realistic about the smaller one and being quite practical, what you need to do now in order to achieve the small goal, and then celebrating. That's so important for your mindset. It's so important to celebrate instead of just rushing to the next. Taking a moment to, wow, actually, I did something that I have never done before. We are on track and we're going in the direction that we want to go, or I want to go, and then taking the next step.
I love that. And I love how you related this to feedback as well, and how to kind of overcome maybe difficult feedback that you've received. I've never really thought about it that way. But yeah, totally agree. Having a clear vision makes day to day decision making much easier, and feedback from what you say. And yeah, I love that also, like, you're right. The idea of celebrating is so important. And so I think underrated by so many leaders, and acknowledging others too for their accomplishments. Also very important that we celebrate together. Yeah, wonderful. Birgit, thank you so much for your time today. Like, this has been really great. I know it's just a small piece of your book and your story, but this is why I want to encourage everyone to go and check it out. Where can people find Boulder and learn more about your work?
The easiest way is to go to my website, which is my name, birgithermann.com. And there's the section about my book. And then you can like link through to what's the easiest way to get the book, depending on your geography. And there's also some additional tools to download there to, yeah, the growth zone framework and other things. So I would really encourage people to check that out and connect with me either through, yeah, everything is on the website, but yeah, find me on LinkedIn, find my email address, and would be great to connect with people who share the same ambition and passion to make a difference for our planet and for our people. And then together.
Such a great mission. And I'll include that link in the show notes so people can find it there. And so, if there's one idea that you hope stays with leaders after this conversation, what would that be?
I think it's really about every day trying to get out of your comfort zone.
Mm.
And that doesn't need, and really in that one small step at a time mode.
Mm.
So it can be something like take a different way to work, have a cold shower instead of a warm shower, invite someone for lunch that you wouldn't normally invite and spend a lunch break together. Just like small things, just do something a little bit different so that this is just the norm of doing things differently and that this muscle is being trained the whole time.
I love that. So wonderful. Well, thank you, Birgit, for your time. And so great to see you again. And I can't wait to see how much, I'm sure that this movement around your book will grow. And yeah, it's very much in line with a lot of things I also discuss on this podcast. So I hope everyone goes to check it out. And yeah, hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. It was my really great pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.